The colossal doors of the Nexus Prime Coliseum groaned as they slowly creaked open, revealing an arena unlike any other. The crowd fell into an eerie hush. Alien eyes, countless in shape and color, fixed on a lone figure stepping onto the polished floor. The air was thick with anticipation, but something felt off. The vast arena, once a place of festive battles and intergalactic tournaments, now stood still, as if the very stars above held their breath. A strange chill cut through the crowd. The soldier was alone. From the shadows emerged a solitary human. His armor battered, his face unreadable, the weight of 1,000 untold stories hanging in his every step. The crowd's gaze was relentless, yet the man offered nothing. No gestures, no words. His silence was louder than any roar of the arena. The holographic announcer buzzed to life, a programmed voice echoing across the stadium. Only one soldier returned from Earth, and he refused to speak. A murmur rippled through the vast, multi-species assembly. They had waited for this moment for decades. The lost expedition had left Earth under a cloud of mystery and vanished into the abyss of space. The hope was that the soldier would finally reveal what happened to the crew, what secrets the expedition had uncovered. But instead, the man stood mute, staring ahead with eyes that reflected nothing but the weight of untold horrors. In that deafening silence, the crowd could sense something. The man wasn't just refusing to speak. He was hiding something. The tension was unbearable. Would the soldier break his silence? Or would the answers remain lost in the stars forever? The soldier stood at the edge of the intergalactic stage, his figure a stark contrast to the elite beings around him. Clad in a simple, scuffed Earth military uniform, the wrinkles in his fatigues looked as if they'd seen better days, unlike the polished, advanced armor worn by the other participants, who were already perfecting their sleek weaponry and practicing flawless maneuvers. He wasn't what anyone expected. The other competitors, alien soldiers from across the galaxy, hovered in an air of seriousness, their expressions frozen in calculated concentration. Some practiced complex combat techniques with their limbs shifting in impossible directions, while others fine-tuned strange, pulsating devices that hummed with unnatural energy. Yet the human soldier, Marcus Gray, leaned back casually against the wall of the preparation area, arms crossed, eyes half-lidded. With a loud sigh, he pulled out a dented, half-empty can of some unrecognizable energy drink and took a long swig. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, then tossed it into a nearby trash bin. "Hey," he called to a passing technician, "any chance there's a diner around here? I could use a good meal before the show." The technician blinked, clearly thrown off by his casual tone. "A diner? Here? You're about to compete in the Galactic trials." Yeah, I get it," Marcus interrupted with a nonchalant shrug. "But, a guy's got to eat. And you got any decent coffee? Or am I going to have to settle for this weird, glowing goo they keep offering around here?" The room fell silent for a beat, the alien soldiers exchanging looks. None of them had seen anything like him. The human, this soldier from Earth, seemed to have little concern for the grand occasion. While they meditated and focused their minds on the battles ahead, he just seemed relaxed. And that was exactly what made him dangerous. He didn't follow the rules, didn't behave like the others. But Marcus knew something they didn't. The universe might be filled with powerful, alien warriors, but none of them understood the one thing Earth had mastered: survival against the odds. And he was about to prove it. The room was charged with tension as the holographic displays flickered to life, casting a cold glow over the gathered competitors. Across from Marcus Gray stood the living legend of the Galactic trials, Commander Valther, a towering Zythorian with silver scales that glistened in the artificial light. At 7 feet tall, his muscular frame seemed more machine than flesh, his eyes glowing with the light of 1,000 star systems. Valther was everything Marcus wasn't: disciplined, precise, and cold as the vacuum of space itself. He had won countless tournaments, each more brutal than the last, earning him a reputation so fearsome that even the most powerful races in the galaxy feared to face him. The commander adjusted his combat visor, his voice a low, mechanical hum as he addressed the room. "I don't fight for honor. I fight for victory." His words echoed like a death sentence. Marcus, on the other hand, couldn't care less. His approach was simple: survive. He wasn't in this for the glory. not for fame or the promise of riches. All he wanted was to prove that a human, one ordinary soldier from Earth, could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's finest warriors. And as Valther's calculating gaze swept over him, Marcus couldn't help but smirk. The odds were stacked against him. The betting odds, too. Statistical impossibility was a term that kept flashing in every data stream. Marcus wasn't the strongest, the most skilled, or the most refined. He had no advanced tech, no psychic powers, no genetically enhanced reflexes. But he had something none of them did, a raw, stubborn will to push through, no matter the odds. Valther's sneer was barely visible under his helmet, but was there. He was used to crushing opponents with ease. And yet, the soldiers around Marcus watched him with a mix of amusement and disdain. They saw him as a relic, a survivor from a distant planet, out of his depth among the finest warriors of the cosmos. Marcus didn't flinch. He simply cracked his neck, eyes locked on Valther's silhouette, his mind already racing through his own strategies. There was no way he was going down without a fight. The arena's countdown began, echoing across the chamber. The challenge was clear. Survive the trials, or fall to the legend of Valther. The tension was unbearable. And as the opening gong rang out, Marcus knew one thing for certain. He would either prove the galaxy wrong or be crushed by the weight of its expectations. The preparation room was a strange place. While the galaxy's finest combatants tuned their gear, ran simulations, and meditated in silence, Marcus Gray was doing push-ups on the floor with a half-empty protein bar in one hand. "Just gotta keep it simple," he muttered to himself, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth as his chest hit the floor, and he pushed himself back up. Beside him, a squad of insectoid Xari warriors, towering, with chitinous armor and mandibles that clacked like the sound of heavy machinery, stared down at him. They tilted their heads in confusion, their segmented eyes glowing softly. One of them, who appeared to be their leader, finally spoke in a sharp, clicking tone. "You warm up like this?" It was more of a statement than a question. Marcus paused mid-push-up, grinning up at them. "What can I say? I don't need fancy gadgets. Just me, my body, and a bit of grit." He pushed up again. "Besides, I've found the key to surviving is always to keep your heart pumping and your brain, well, awake." The leader of the Xari raised a clawed brow. "You are strange." Marcus snorted, then did a quick backflip, landing on his feet. He winked. "Well, you know what they say. It's better to be strange than predictable." The next group to approach was a pair of Seraphon twins, tall, winged beings, with an elegance that made even the most graceful dancers seem clumsy. They floated in, perfectly synchronized, adjusting their flight harnesses with impeccable precision. They stared at Marcus, who had now moved on to shadow boxing in the middle of the room, throwing wildly exaggerated punches into the air, as if preparing for a fight with invisible opponents. "Is that really your warm-up?" one of the Seraphon asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah, just getting the blood flowing," Marcus said breezily. "Also, you'd be surprised how much practice you get from fighting imaginary foes. They're tricky, but they don't pack a punch." The Seraphon twins exchanged glances, and then both shook their heads in unison. "Humans," they muttered, their voices filled with equal parts confusion and amusement. Marcus just shrugged and continued his ridiculous moves, throwing a series of awkward karate kicks that made the crystalline being practicing levitation nearby visibly vibrate with what could only be laughter. "Just warming up for the main event," he called over to them, still grinning. "Nothing too serious. I mean, who needs a sleek, perfectly timed fight routine when you got this?" He gestured to himself, as if his quirky, uncoordinated routine was some secret weapon. Though they were confused, the others couldn't help but watch with a certain kind of curiosity. Marcus might not have had the fancy equipment, the chiseled physique, or the studied techniques of his competitors, but what he lacked in polish, he more than made up for in sheer unpredictability. As the countdown to start the trials ticked down, Marcus stretched one last time, throwing a lazy wink at a hovering, glittering entity who'd been eyeing him curiously from the corner. "Here we go," he muttered, the smile never leaving his face. Time to prove them all wrong. No one could deny one thing. Marcus Gray wasn't like the others. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what he needed to win. The first match was against an Erythean, a warrior with the ability to bend time in short bursts. His movements were swift and precise, each attack coming from a different direction, seemingly impossible to predict. The crowd buzzed with excitement, anticipating the perfect execution of time manipulation in combat. Marcus, however, was unfazed. As the Erythean lunged forward, Marcus casually sidestepped, barely moving, just enough to avoid the attack. The Erythean paused, confused, his eyes narrowing. The fighter manipulated time again, speeding up his movements so rapidly that his form became a blur. The crowd gasped. This was a technique few had ever seen countered. Marcus, on the other hand, simply scratched his chin and let out a dramatic yawn. You know, you really should take it easy. You're going to pull a muscle if you keep that up. The Erythean blinked, taken aback. That was not the response he expected. In a split second, the Erythean sped forward once more, his hand outstretched for a strike. But Marcus, without even looking, reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, a laser pointer. With a quick flick of his wrist, he pointed the small red dot onto the ground in front of the Erythean. For a moment, the warrior's eyes locked onto moving red. His focus completely shattered. Marcus took advantage of the distraction, tripping the Erythean with a well-timed kick to his side. The Erythean flailed, losing his balance and crashing to the ground. The crowd burst into laughter, and even the referee's robotic voice crackled in confusion. What was that technique? Just a little distraction, Marcus shrugged nonchalantly, a smirk on his face as he casually leaned against the arena's edge. Sometimes, the best way to win isn't to outsmart your opponent's powers. It's to outdistract them. The next match saw Marcus facing off against a Zyrathian, an alien with the ability to create massive shockwaves with a single touch. The Zyrathian's thick, muscular form was a sight to behold as he stomped on the field, each step sending tremors through the ground. As the match began, the Zyrathian slammed his fist into the arena floor, sending shockwaves that cracked the ground. The force was enough to send most opponents tumbling. Marcus, however, simply stepped to the side. Whoa! Easy there, big guy, he yelled, hands in the air as if trying to calm down a wild animal. You're going to break the place. The Zyrathian, snarling, tried again, his fists pummeling the floor with more force. But each time, Marcus easily dodged the tremors, his movements almost casual. Finally, with a grin, Marcus reached down and picked up a discarded piece of debris from the floor, a half-crushed energy drink can. He held it up. Careful with that, Marcus said, eyeing the Zyrathian. You're spilling more than you're making here. With a quick, bold move, Marcus tossed him directly into Zyrathian's face, hitting him square in the eyes. The massive fighter roared in frustration, swinging his arms wildly to try and clear the debris, but his shockwaves now were all over the place, wild and uncontrolled. Marcus stepped in, ducking under a flailing arm and giving the Zyrathian a gentle shove that sent him stumbling backward. The Zyrathian, caught off guard, tripped and crashed to the ground. Marcus straightened up, brushing his hands off. Guess you should stick to the basics, huh? He said with a chuckle as the referee gave the signal for the match to end. By the time Marcus entered his third match, this one against a floating, ethereal being capable of manipulating gravitational fields, the crowd was no longer just confused. They were thoroughly entertained. Marcus's laid-back attitude, quirky distractions, and unpredictable moves were beginning to turn heads. The ethereal being hovered high above the arena, its form shifting like liquid light. It sent a pulse of gravity at Marcus, intending to crush him under its immense weight. Most would have been pinned instantly, unable to resist. Marcus, however, simply raised his hands in mock surrender. Okay, you win. I'm done, he shouted. But his tone was playful, almost as if he wasn't even trying to escape. The ethereal being hovered in closer, tightening its grip on the gravity field. But just as it seemed Marcus would be crushed, he dropped to the ground and rolled into a graceful somersault, dodging the pull with ease. As he stood, he grabbed a piece of floating debris and used it to prop himself up, ignoring the danger entirely. All right, your turn, Marcus said, grinning widely. He made a rude gesture at the entity's shimmering form. But hey, let's make this interesting. Try not to hit me next time, okay? The ethereal being hesitated, and for the briefest moment, it seemed disoriented by Marcus's irreverent attitude. That hesitation was all he needed. With one swift, surprisingly well-timed move, Marcus darted forward, using his own momentum to slam into the floating form with surprising force. The entity staggered and fell to the ground, defeated. The crowd erupted into applause, but Marcus simply waved them off. Honestly, guys, I didn't even break a sweat. Valther leaned forward, his sharp gaze narrowing. He had been taught that combat was about precision, about the fine balance between strength, technique, and tradition. It was why he had risen to the top of the trials, why no one had ever come close to beating him. He had perfected the art of war, the old ways. But Marcus was something different. He didn't follow the rules. He didn't even seem to acknowledge them. Instead of engaging with the enemy's strength, he used humor, unpredictability, and simple tricks, things that should have been beneath a fighter of his caliber. And yet it was working. Valther's claws clenched at his sides. He'd seen his opponents use technological enhancements, psychic abilities, and ancient combat techniques honed over millennia. But nothing prepared him for a human who treated the trials like a game he was somehow winning. The Zythorian commander's jaw tightened as he leaned back in his chair, his sharp mind calculating. Could it be possible? Could this human, this soldier, actually be the one to undo everything Valther had spent centuries perfecting? He had faced countless beings who had tried to outsmart him, and yet no one had succeeded. Why was Marcus different? Valther's thoughts shifted to the core of his being. He had always fought with honor, following the ancient ways. He fought for victory, but more importantly, for the legacy of his people. Combat wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about adhering to the strict codes of battle, the rules that defined a true warrior. But Marcus was throwing all of that out the window. He was an unpredictable force, one that refused to be contained by tradition or expectation, and that made him, in Valther's eyes, a threat unlike any other. With a deep breath, Valther stood, his towering form casting a long shadow across the room. His mind was racing. He would face Marcus soon, in the final rounds. The rules of the trials demanded it, but Valther knew, for the first time in his life, that the real challenge wasn't in defeating this human. It was in understanding how to fight someone who refused to be fought by the old ways. Perhaps, Valther said quietly, almost himself, this human is a true test, not of my strength, but of my adaptability. He turned toward the arena, a low growl of determination building in his chest. And I will adapt. The tension in the arena was palpable as the final round of the Galactic trials loomed on the horizon. The vast stadium, once a cacophony of excitement and curiosity, had grown quiet, its inhabitants murmuring in disbelief. Marcus Gray, the lone human soldier from Earth, stood at the edge of the battleground, casually adjusting the straps of his worn-out combat boots, as if he were about to take part in a routine drill rather than the final battle of the most prestigious intergalactic tournament. From every corner of the galaxy, spectators had gathered to witness the climax of the trials. Warrior races, some of the most feared and revered combatants in the known universe, watched with bated breath, each eager to see how this human, with no formal training, no battle-honed experience, and no respect for tradition, would fare against the galaxy's deadliest adversary, Commander Valther, the living legend of the Zythorian people. The betting markets, once filled with unshakable confidence in Valther's victory, now displayed a glaring message. Error does not compute. The odds had shifted, and for the first time in centuries, the calculations for victory had no clear answer. On one side of the arena stood Valther, towering over the crowd, his silver scales gleaming in the harsh light. His reputation preceded him, 300 years undefeated, a general of unmatched skill. But today, there was something different in his eyes. It wasn't just the physical preparation or the cold calculation that made him so terrifying. It was the uncertainty, the nagging doubt that this human might just do the unthinkable. In the stands, the murmurs grew louder, mixed with disbelief and excitement. How did he make it this far? An Arcteron warrior muttered to his companion. What is this human? He doesn't even follow basic protocol. He's defying all logic. Another spectator whispered. Look at him. He doesn't have a single technique to speak of. It's like he's making it up as he goes along. But Marcus wasn't making it up. He was simply existing in a world where rules didn't bind him, where tradition and expectation were mere obstacles to be sidestepped with a wink, a grin, and a well-timed distraction. A collective shudder rippled through the arena as Marcus and Valther stood facing each other. The tension between them was like the calm before a storm, a stillness that belied the chaos that was about to unfold. Officials moved into place, their stern expressions betraying the uncertainty of the situation. They had seen it all: genetically enhanced soldiers, psionic warriors, beings who could bend the laws of physics themselves. Yet none of them had ever seen a competitor like Marcus Gray. The humans' methods were as unpredictable as they were frustrating, but there was no denying his progress. Each fight, each round, had been a testament to his resilience, and as the final confrontation approached, the galaxy's greatest minds found themselves asking the same question. Could he actually win? Valther, the lead official, called, "You are the reigning champion. Your victory is expected by all. You are the finest combatant in the galaxy. Are you prepared?" The Zythorian gave a slight, grim nod, his voice low and steady. "I will adapt to whatever this human brings." The official then turned to Marcus, his eyes lingering for a moment longer than necessary, as if trying to discern some hidden strategy within the soldier's carefree stance. "And you, Marcus Gray of Earth, the odds are stacked against you, but you defied all expectation so far. Are you ready for this final battle?" Marcus stretched casually, popping his neck as if he were preparing for a sparring match rather than an epic showdown. He looked up at the official, giving him a grin that sent a ripple of nervous laughter through the crowd. "Ready? I'm always ready. Let's just hope Valther's ready for my moves." The spectators chuckled nervously, some out of amusement, others because they had no idea how to interpret Marcus's words. The moment was absurd. The human had spent the entire tournament making light of everything. Even his most dangerous adversaries had been reduced to mere pawns in his odd game, distracted by the sheer unpredictability of his style. A few moments later, the countdown to the final began. 3, 2, 1. The signal rang out, and the battle commenced. Valther surged forward, his massive form rocketing across the arena, fists raised in a display of overwhelming power. He was a force of nature, his every movement precise and calculated. But Marcus? He did nothing of the sort. Instead, he sidestepped, rolling with effortless grace as if he were sparring with a friend. He didn't counterattack, didn't try to match Valther's force. No, Marcus simply dodged, danced around him, and occasionally threw in a snarky comment or two. "You're a little slow for someone with such a big reputation, aren't you?" Marcus teased, evading yet another brutal strike from Valther. The crowd gasped, unsure if they were witnessing brilliance or madness. But Marcus wasn't making a mockery of Valther. He was playing to his strengths. He didn't need to be the fastest or the strongest. He only needed to make Valther lose focus. And that's when it hit the spectators like a wave. This human was winning the battle of minds. Each time Marcus dodged or avoided Valther's onslaught, he did it with an air of casual disinterest. But underneath the humor and the mockery, there was a razor-sharp purpose. He wasn't playing for points or glory. He was playing for survival. And if the stakes weren't high enough already, the realization dawned on everyone watching. Marcus wasn't just defying expectations. He was completely rewriting the rules of combat itself. The odds were no longer a question of physicality. The stakes were now about something much deeper. Could tradition withstand the storm of the human mind? As Marcus moved with a grace that both infuriated and confused his opponent, the air crackled with a tense uncertainty. The crowd could barely contain themselves as they watched this clash of worlds unfold. One, the epitome of tradition and precision. The other, a lone soldier, armed only with a reverence and a refusal to conform. And with each second that passed, the stakes grew higher. The arena fell into a profound silence as the final battle began. The galaxy's eyes were fixed on the two combatants, each representing a different world, a different philosophy. On one side, Commander Valther stood tall, a paragon of order and tradition. His Zythorian physique glinted like polished metal, every movement calculated, every gesture precise. His reputation as an undefeated champion echoed through the ages, and now, in the heart of the galaxy, it would be tested. On the other side, Marcus Gray, the lone human from Earth, stretched his arms lazily, like he was preparing for a morning jog rather than the most important fight of his life. He was an enigma, an agent of chaos, a trickster with no respect for tradition, no concern for the expected rules of combat. His grin was as wide as ever, a stark contrast to the stoic intensity of Valther. Ready to break your record? Marcus called out, winking at his opponent. Or is this where the legend finally ends? Valther's eyes narrowed. The human's arrogance wasn't just a display of bravado. It was a challenge to everything he stood for. In his culture, combat was sacred. It was a dance perfection of absolute focus. This chaos was something he had never had to face. But it was time to prove that tradition would always outlast any disruption. With a roar, Valther lunged forward, his massive fists cutting through the air like thunder. The ground beneath him cracked as his power surged. Each punch calculated to land with unyielding precision. Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he sidestepped in a lazy arc, effortlessly avoiding the massive strikes. It was almost like he wasn't even trying. He twirled around Valther, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Man, you're really mad, huh?" Marcus said, dodging yet another earth-shattering blow. "I mean, we're just fighting, right? Don't need to break the whole place." Valther growled, his strikes growing more intense, each one faster than the last. He wasn't just fighting to win. He was fighting to regain control. The human's unpredictability was shaking him, throwing him off balance. With a flash of light, Valther sent a series of kinetic waves toward Marcus, rippling to the ground like shock waves of pure energy. The arena seemed to tremble with the force, a show of raw power meant to crush any opponent in its path. But Marcus was already gone. With a sudden, wild leap, he cleared the shock wave, landing on the edge of a broken pillar, and flipping backward with a loud, exaggerated whoop. "Nice try, big guy. But, I think I left my world-ending shockwave protection back in the locker room," Marcus said, adjusting his shirt as he landed with a carefree thud. The crowd's tension cracked into a confused chuckle. Marcus was playing, yes, but there was something deeply unsettling about his playful attitude. He wasn't just avoiding danger. He was dismissing it. Valther clenched his fists, his frustration mounting. This wasn't how things were supposed to go, but no matter how hard he focused, how precise his strikes became, he couldn't land a blow. This human was making a mockery of the very concept of combat. His eyes flickered toward the officials, who were nervously watching from the sidelines. They had seen countless warriors, brave, strong, skilled. But no one had ever fought like this. Without warning, Marcus raised a hand as if signaling for a timeout. "Hold up, Valther," he called out, his voice light. "Before we keep going, I just gotta ask, how do you really do it? The whole legendary undefeated thing?" Valther paused, his massive frame halting mid-motion. He stared at Marcus, a flicker of confusion crossing his mind. Marcus took advantage of the brief pause, pulling a small, handheld device from his pocket. "I've got this cool little thing back on Earth," he said casually, tapping the screen. "It's called Metronome app. Turns out resonant frequencies work wonders on unstable kinetic fields. Who would have thought, right?" Before Valther could react, Marcus held the phone up to the air, pressing play. A soft, rhythmic click-click-click of a metronome began to sound from the speakers. Valther's eyes widened. In that instant, the ground beneath them seemed to shift. The kinetic fields Valther had been manipulating beginning to vibrate erratically. The shock waves he had so carefully crafted faltered, losing their power as the subtle sound waves from Marcus's metronome resonated through the arena. It wasn't physical force. It was an anomaly that defied the laws of energy Valther had trusted his entire life. "Whoa, what is this trickery?" Valther snarled, trying to regain control of the field. "Oh, it's not trickery," Marcus said, still grinning. "It's just science. Simple stuff, really. You'd be surprised how much chaos you can make with a little rhythm." With that, Marcus surged forward, using the same unpredictable motion he had since the beginning, moving with unteachable agility, spinning and rolling with no visible pattern, no technique to follow. And then, in a move that was as bizarre as it was brilliant, Marcus reached up, grabbed a chunk of debris from the ground, and flung it right at Valther's face. The Zythorian barely had time to react as the debris bounced off his skull, disorienting him long enough for Marcus to dart in, landing a swift, unexpected punch to his midsection. The crowd was stunned into silence. Valther staggered back, his breath caught in his throat. This wasn't supposed to happen. This human, this unpredictable, untrained human, had just landed a blow. Marcus stepped back, wiping his hands dramatically. "You okay, big guy? Didn't think I hit that hard." Valther's vision blurred with rage. With a roar, he lunged again, but this time Marcus was ready. As Valther's arms came crashing down, Marcus leaped sideways, then slid under the attack with an almost lazy motion. It was like a dance, one he was choreographing with ease. The two warriors clashed once more, but now Valther's precision was faltering, his pride and his traditional techniques failing him. Marcus was everywhere, unpredictable, like the wind, always just out of reach. In one final, heart-stopping moment, Marcus used Valther's own momentum against him. With a quick step to the side, he tripped the larger fighter, sending him crashing to the arena floor in an undignified heap. The arena exploded into chaos, shouts, gasps, disbelief. The legend of Valther had fallen. Marcus stood over him, not in victory, but in quiet amusement. Guess you should have been more prepared for that. As Valther lay on the floor, gasping for breath, he realized the truth. It wasn't just Marcus's physical prowess that had won the battle. It was his ability to break free from the constraints of tradition, to turn chaos into his weapon, and that, more than anything else, had defeated him. The final clash had been nothing short of extraordinary. The vast arena now buzzed with the energy of thousands of spectators, all processing what had just transpired. The Zythorian legend, Commander Valther, had been defeated, not by brute force, nor by conventional technique, but by a human soldier's unpredictability, chaos, and sheer audacity. Marcus Gray stood at the center of the arena, breathing steadily, his posture still relaxed as if he had just finished a casual stroll. The roar of the crowd felt distant to him, a faint echo compared to the thumping of his own heartbeat. He glanced down at his opponent, who lay on the ground, stunned and disoriented. There was no triumph in Marcus's eyes, just a tired satisfaction, like he had completed a difficult puzzle he never truly expected to solve. Valther, slowly rising to his feet, met Marcus's gaze. For the first time in the entire tournament, there was no contempt in his eyes, just a flicker of reluctant respect. "You broke the rules," Valther said, his voice hoarse, yet clear. But perhaps the rules were always meant to be broken. Marcus shrugged, his grin wide but tempered by an unexpected wisdom. Rules are like speed bumps. You can either slow down and crawl over them, or you can find a way to jump right over. The crowd was still in shock, their chants rising and falling in disbelief. Marcus had done the impossible, not just by winning, but by showing the galaxy that victory didn't belong solely to those who adhere to tradition and discipline. His victory wasn't just a personal achievement. It was a seismic shift, a challenge to the very fabric of the competitive ideals that had ruled the galaxy for centuries. Officials began to file into the arena, their faces a mix of confusion and admiration. The head of the Galactic trials approached Marcus, his stern demeanor now softened by the wonder of the moment. "You have done what no one believed possible," the official said, pausing before adding. "But your methods, they defy everything we've been taught." Marcus glanced around, taking in the faces of those who had once looked upon him as an outsider, an underdog, a joke. Now he was their champion. Sometimes it's the methods you don't see coming that make all the difference. His words hung in the air, almost defying the boundaries of the arena itself. For the first time, those watching weren't just seeing a human soldier. They were seeing a paradigm shift, a challenge to the very nature of combat, to the structures that govern the galaxy's most sacred competitions. As Marcus stood victorious, a quiet realization settled over him. He hadn't just defied the odds, he had shattered them. By refusing to conform, by embracing chaos, he had shown that adaptability, humor, and spontaneity could be just as powerful as precision and tradition. Valther, still catching his breath, approached him slowly, his earlier aggression now replaced with curiosity. You didn't need to fight the way we do, he admitted. You didn't need to follow our ways. You just were yourself. Marcus chuckled softly, offering his hand. I guess that's the secret, Valther. You don't have to be the biggest or the best. You just have to be unpredictable enough to keep everyone on their toes. For a moment, the two stood in silence, their differences now irrelevant. In that shared space, it wasn't about alien or human, old or new. It was about a new way forward. A way that didn't demand conformity but embraced evolution, where growth came from bending the rules rather than following them. As Marcus walked away from the center of the arena, he looked out at the crowd, their chants now more celebratory than anything else. For once, the galaxy wasn't clapping for tradition or perfection. They were clapping for change. The implications of his victory were far-reaching. His win wasn't just a fluke. It was a message to the galaxy that things didn't always have to be the way they had always been. It was a challenge to break free from the chains of the past, to create space for new ways of thinking, of fighting, and of living. And in that moment, standing tall in the spotlight of the arena, Marcus realized something even deeper. This wasn't just about him. It was about every underdog, every misfit who had ever been told they weren't enough. It was about showing them that their differences weren't flaws, they were strengths. Maybe next time, Marcus said to no one in particular, his voice barely rising above the roar of the crowd. I'll try to make it interesting. Maybe I'll bring a few more surprises. As he walked off the battlefield, a smile crept across his face, not because he had won, but because he had shown them something no one ever thought possible. That sometimes the best way to win isn't to follow the rules. It's to make your own. And that was a lesson that would echo throughout the galaxy for years to come as the cheers of the crowd slowly faded, and the galaxy's attention shifted to other events. Marcus Gray found himself standing in the quiet aftermath of his victory. The way of the moment hadn't quite settled in. He had beaten the odds, shattered expectations, and upended a centuries-old tradition. But even as the accolades poured in, his mind was already drifting forward toward what came next. He glanced over at Valther, who was still standing, shaking his head in disbelief. The Zythorian wasn't the only one left reeling from the unpredictability Marcus had unleashed. Across the galaxy, combat schools, military academies, and elite training facilities were already recalculating their methods. The galaxy's perfect order had just been cracked wide open, and now everyone was wondering what this new paradigm would mean. Marcus chuckled to himself. This could get interesting. Just as the officials started to approach him with more questions, Marcus raised a hand, signaling for them to hold on. Yeah, I get it, he said, grinning, but I'm kind of curious what comes next. Something even weirder. What's the point of winning if you can't shake things up a little more? One of the officials paused, looking at him in disbelief. What do you mean? Marcus gave a sly smile. Well, the galaxy's rules are already broken. Time to break some more. Without waiting for a response, he turned and began walking away, his voice trailing behind him. Mission accomplished. But hey, I've only just started. So, send me the next challenge. As the dust of the arena settled, the galaxy's leaders took note. They had underestimated this human, a soldier from a planet that was barely on the map. Now they realized he wasn't just a one-off anomaly. He was the future. And if Marcus Gray had anything to say about it, the galaxy wasn't ready for what was coming next. Stay tuned. This is only the beginning. What do you think Marcus will do next? Drop your thoughts in the comment below. And don't forget to subscribe for more of the galaxy's most unpredictable adventures.